In 1994, South Africa ended apartheid, closing the door on nearly half a century of institutionalized racial segregation and oppression. But the roots of this struggle ran far deeper, stretching back to the early 20th century, when laws like the Natives Land Act of 1913 began systematically dispossessing black South Africans of their land. For decades, families were torn apart, communities uprooted, and dreams stifled under the weight of a system designed to divide and control. The world watched as millions of South Africans, many voting for the very first time, lined up at polling stations with hope and determination etched on their faces. It was a moment that felt like the dawn of a new era, a collective exhale after generations of struggle and sacrifice. Nelson Mandela's rise from prisoner to president ignited hope for a new era. His journey from the darkness of a prison cell to the highest office in the land became a symbol of resilience and forgiveness, inspiring not only South Africans but people around the globe. But Mandela was not alone. Countless others, from Walter Sisulu to Albertina Sisulu, from Steve Biko to ordinary men and women, risked everything for freedom. Mandela's leadership promised a future where dignity and equality would replace division and hatred. The Rainbow Nation was born, a vision of unity, equality and reconciliation. For the first time, people of all races could imagine a country where they belonged, where their voices mattered and where their dreams could take root. The streets echoed with songs of freedom, and the air was thick with possibility. For many, the memory of standing in line to vote remains one of the proudest moments of their lives, a day when history shifted and hope felt tangible. South Africans dared to dream of progress and healing, believing decades of injustice could be overcome. Families envisioned better lives for their children, free from the fear and limitations of the past. Communities gathered in celebration, united by a shared sense of purpose and hope for a brighter tomorrow. Yet, beneath the surface, the trauma of apartheid lingered, stories of loss, resilience and survival passed down through generations. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, led by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, offered a platform for healing, encouraging the nation to confront its painful history, seek justice and forgive, even when it seemed impossible. For many, the process was deeply personal. Mothers faced the men who had taken their sons, and survivors recounted horrors they had long buried. The nation wept together, hoping that truth could pave the way for reconciliation. Mandela's government set ambitious goals: build homes, provide services, and uplift communities that had been neglected for generations. New housing projects sprang up, and efforts to bring clean water and electricity to rural areas began in earnest. For some, these changes were life-altering. A grandmother in the Eastern Cape recalls the joy of turning on a tap in her home for the first time, a simple act that once seemed impossible. There was a drive to create opportunities for the previously disenfranchised. Job training programs, education initiatives, and support for small businesses aimed to empower those who had been excluded from the economy for so long. For many, these opportunities were the first step toward reclaiming agency and dignity, proof that the dream of a better life was within reach. The world saw South Africa as a beacon of forgiveness and peaceful change. International leaders praised the country's transition, and global media celebrated the spirit of reconciliation that seemed to define the new South Africa. The nation's story inspired others facing their own struggles, and for a time, South Africa stood as a symbol of what was possible when hope triumphed over hate. Yet, beneath the optimism, deep structural inequalities remained. Apartheid's legacy was more than just laws. It shaped where people lived, learned and worked. The stark contrast between affluent suburbs and sprawling informal settlements was a daily reminder of the work still to be done. For every child who walked to a well-resourced school, Many more faced overcrowded classrooms and limited opportunities. Dismantling apartheid's legal framework was only the first step. Erasing its social and economic scars would prove far harder. Generations of disadvantage could not be undone overnight, and the path to true equality was long and uncertain. Many who had fought for freedom now found themselves waiting, sometimes for jobs, sometimes for justice, sometimes for the promise of a better life. The euphoria of freedom could not mask the immense challenges ahead in building a truly just nation. For many, the dream of a better life remained just out of reach, deferred but not forgotten as South Africa continued its journey toward healing and justice. The dream endures in the stories of those who refuse to give up, who still believe that, one day, the promise of 1994 will be fulfilled for all. 3 decades after the birth of democracy, the Rainbow Nation's colours have faded, and the promise of a new South Africa is under strain. The unity Mandela championed is now tested by persistent inequality, racial tension and widespread disillusionment. Over 55% of South Africans live below the poverty line, while the richest 10% control more than 85% of the nation's wealth. The gap between rich and poor is among the widest in the world. Crime is rampant. South Africa's murder rate is among the highest globally, with over 27,000 homicides reported in the past year. Fear and mistrust run deep, fueling further divides. The ANC, once a symbol of liberation, is now mired in corruption scandals and internal infighting. Public confidence in government has plummeted, with only 27% of citizens expressing trust in political leaders. Unemployment stands at nearly 33%, and youth unemployment is even higher, over 60%. Many South Africans wait hours for basic services, and the dream of a united, prosperous nation feels increasingly out of reach. "We were promised a better life, but it feels like we're still waiting," says Thandi, a mother of 3 from Soweto. Many now wonder if the rainbow has faded for good, or if hope can still be found in the storm. South Africa is a land of stark contrasts. Luxury suburbs stand beside sprawling informal settlements, separated by little more than a fence or a road. The divide is visible from the air, but it's even more palpable on the ground, where opportunity and hardship exist side by side. In these neighbourhoods, the daily realities of wealth and poverty are inescapable, shaping the lives and futures of millions. The country remains the world's most unequal society, with the majority still trapped in poverty. For many, survival depends on government grants or informal work, and the hope of a better life often feels out of reach. Children play in the streets while their parents wait in long lines, hoping for assistance that barely covers basic needs. According to Dr. Thandi Maseko, a leading sociologist at the University of Cape Town, the legacy of apartheid's spatial planning is still with us. The poor are kept far from economic centres, making upward mobility almost impossible. Case studies from Khayelitsha and Alexandra reveal families living on less than $2 a day with little access to quality education or healthcare. Economic freedom is elusive. Unemployment is a national emergency, especially for the youth. Factories that once provided jobs now stand silent, and young adults spend their days searching for work that simply isn't there. The frustration of wasted potential is everywhere, as dreams are put on hold and ambitions are stifled by a lack of opportunity. Saifo, a 24-year-old graduate, shares, "I did everything right, studied hard, got my degree. But there are no jobs. My family depends on me, but I feel helpless." Experts warn that without urgent intervention, the country risks losing an entire generation to hopelessness. Desperation fuels violent crime, murder rates are among the world's highest, and fear shapes daily life. In many communities, security patrols and police tape are a common sight, reminders of the dangers that lurk after dark. Families live with the constant anxiety that crime could strike at any moment, and trust in law enforcement is often fragile. Captain Mokoena, a police officer in Johannesburg, explains, "We are overwhelmed. There are simply not enough resources to protect everyone." In 2023 alone, over 25,000 murders were reported, with countless more cases of robbery and assault. Racial tensions simmer as land and wealth remain largely in white hands, perpetuating old resentments. The legacy of apartheid is still felt in the ownership of land and resources, fueling protests and calls for justice. Many see the slow pace of change as a betrayal of the promises made at the dawn of democracy. Land activist Nomvula Dlamini says, "We were promised land, but decades later most of us are still waiting." The anger is real, and it's growing. The government's land reform programme has been slow and fraught with controversy, deepening divisions. Public discourse is charged, with blame and frustration on all sides. Heated debates erupt in town halls and on the streets, as citizens demand answers and accountability from leaders. The sense of urgency is growing, and the pressure for meaningful reform is stronger than ever. Economist Dr. Johan van der Merwe notes, "Without bold policy changes, the gap between rich and poor will only widen. We need investment in education, infrastructure and job creation." Social media has become a battleground for ideas, amplifying both hope and anger. The dream of a non-racial society is challenged by the reality that race and economic destiny remain tightly linked. For the next generation, the hope is to break these chains and build a future where opportunity is not determined by the colour of one's skin, but by the content of one's character and the strength of their aspirations. As teacher Lindiwe Nkosi puts it, "We must teach our children to see beyond race, but we cannot ignore the inequalities that persist. Only by facing them together can we move forward." The road ahead is uncertain, but the struggle for justice and equality continues, one story, one community, one generation at a time. In 2003, the South African government introduced Black Economic Empowerment, or BE, as a bold step to address deep-rooted economic imbalances left by apartheid. BE was designed to boost black participation in the economy through incentives, quotas and support for black-owned businesses. The policy has helped create a new black middle class, opened doors to education and home ownership, and fostered a generation of black professionals and entrepreneurs. However, critics argue that BE has mostly benefited a politically connected elite, with some using their influence to secure lucrative contracts and positions, while millions remain excluded from real progress. Many white South Africans, especially those without advanced skills or higher education, have faced job losses, exclusion from opportunities, and a sense of growing insecurity. These changes have fueled resentment and deepened racial divides, sometimes sparking protests and heated public debates. While BE has brought opportunity to some, many communities, both black and white, still struggle with poverty, unemployment, and limited access to quality education and healthcare. The unintended consequences of these policies have complicated the quest for true equality, leaving South Africa with a mixed legacy, one where opportunity and hardship remain unevenly distributed, and the promise of transformation is still a work in progress. While Black Economic Empowerment, or BE, has undeniably lifted a select group of black South Africans into the ranks of the middle and upper class, the reality for most remains starkly different. The emergence of black professionals, entrepreneurs and executives in the cities is a powerful symbol of progress. But it is only part of the story. For every success story, there are countless others still waiting for their chance. For the vast majority, especially those living in rural areas and sprawling townships, poverty is still a daily struggle. Many families continue to face unemployment, inadequate housing, and limited access to quality education and healthcare. In the Eastern Cape, a mother named Thandiwe wakes before dawn each day, hoping to find work as a domestic helper. Her children share a single room, their dreams shaped by the boundaries of poverty. Decades after the end of apartheid, frustration simmers as people feel betrayed by unfulfilled promises of a better life. Hopes for rapid transformation have faded, replaced by a sense of abandonment and disillusionment. Saifo, a university graduate, spends his days searching for work, his degree offering little protection against the harsh realities of the job market. The visible success of a fortunate few, driving luxury cars and living in affluent suburbs, often breeds cynicism and anger among the majority left behind. The contrast between wealth and poverty is more glaring than ever. In Soweto, children watch expensive cars speed by, a daily reminder of the distance between their world and that of the elite. In this climate, populist movements and political parties gain traction by promising radical change, tapping into the deep sense of injustice and inequality that persists. Leaders like Julius Malema draw massive crowds, their fiery speeches echoing the frustrations of those who feel left behind. Meanwhile, a new and unexpected phenomenon has emerged: white poverty. Once associated with privilege, some white South Africans now find themselves living in conditions they never imagined possible. In Pretoria, the Van der Merwe family struggles to make ends meet, their former middle-class life a distant memory. Many working-class whites, especially Afrikaners, have been pushed to the margins, now living in shanty towns and informal settlements, struggling to survive. Peter, once a factory worker, now relies on food parcels and odd jobs to support his family. Stripped of the security and opportunities they once took for granted, they now face hunger, unemployment and social isolation. For many, the stigma of poverty is compounded by the expectation that they should not be struggling at all. Their plight is often overlooked by society and the media, as the narrative of privilege overshadows their current reality. Stories like theirs rarely make headlines, but their numbers are growing, yet the growing presence of both black and white poverty serves as a stark reminder that hardship knows no colour. In the face of adversity, communities sometimes find common ground, united by shared struggles. In a small settlement outside Cape Town, black, white and coloured families gather for a communal meal, their differences set aside by necessity. Policies designed to heal the wounds of the past have, in some cases, created new victims, those who feel left out or left behind by the system. In Mitchell's Plain, coloured communities voice their frustration, feeling invisible in the new order. Today, the gap between rich and poor is no longer defined solely by race. It is a chasm that separates the privileged elite from the struggling masses, regardless of background. The walls that divide are now built of wealth, not just history. In this new South Africa, the true divide is not just black and white, but between those with power and opportunity and those still fighting for a chance at a better life. Across the country, personal stories of struggle and resilience echo the same hope that one day opportunity will belong to all, and poverty will be a memory, not a destiny. Violence is a daily reality in South Africa. In urban townships, especially in Cape Town's Cape Flats, gang warfare has become endemic. According to recent statistics, Cape Town recorded over 2,900 murders in 2023 alone, with a significant portion linked to gang activity. Gangs rule the streets, drawing in children as young as 12. Police forces, often under-resourced and outnumbered, struggle to contain the violence. Many officers admit they feel overwhelmed, and some neighbourhoods have become virtual no-go zones after dark. For residents, survival means living in constant fear. Families reinforce their homes with bars and gates, and children grow up learning which streets to avoid. Many say the violence has stolen their sense of community and hope for the future. In rural areas, white farmers face brutal attacks, so-called farm murders. In 2023, over 300 farm attacks were reported, with more than 60 resulting in murder. These crimes are often marked by extreme cruelty, leaving entire communities traumatized. Many believe these attacks are racially and politically motivated, fueling fear and fortification. Farmers invest heavily in security, and some have joined neighbourhood watch groups or hired private protection. The government, meanwhile, faces criticism for failing to address rural crime. Armed militias now patrol some farmlands, while abandoned properties stand as stark reminders of families forced to flee. The exodus of farmers threatens food security, with agricultural unions warning of long-term consequences for the nation's food supply. Violence, both urban and rural, fractures communities and inflames old wounds. Social workers report rising cases of trauma, and many South Africans feel more divided than ever. The cycle of fear and retaliation undermines hopes for reconciliation. As violence escalates, the dream of a united South Africa seems ever more distant, leaving many to wonder if peace is possible. In the face of South Africa's ongoing social and economic challenges, some Afrikaners have retreated into exclusive enclaves like Kleinfontein and Orania, self-declared bastions of Afrikaner identity and autonomy. These communities reject the ideals of the Rainbow Nation, instead preserving their own language, traditions and even currency, while maintaining strict entry requirements. Such enclaves have become symbols of failed integration and persistent division, highlighting the deep fractures that remain in post-apartheid society. On the other side of the spectrum, radical political movements like the Economic Freedom Fighters, or EFF, have surged in popularity, channeling black frustration into confrontational politics. Led by Julius Malema, the EFF calls for land expropriation without compensation, nationalisation of key industries, and economic emancipation for the black majority. Their populist message resonates with millions left behind by moderate reforms, especially among the youth and those living in poverty. The EFF's rising support, alongside the persistence of ethnic enclaves, signals a growing impatience with the status quo and a polarisation of the political landscape. As extremes on both sides gain ground, South Africa's stability is increasingly threatened by deepening divisions and the erosion of the centre. Corruption has deeply hollowed out the South African state, especially under the ANC, eroding public trust and weakening institutions. Once a proud liberation movement, the ANC is now widely seen as self-serving and corrupt, plagued by infighting and scandals that have shaken its legitimacy. The Zuma era epitomized this decline, with state capture and the looting of public resources exposed in painful detail by the Zondo Commission. Billions were siphoned off, leaving the state weakened and vulnerable. Essential services have crumbled. Electricity blackouts, failing water systems and collapsing schools and hospitals are now part of daily life. Public money meant for development has vanished, leaving communities desperate. Frustration boils over in the streets as communities protest and demand basic rights. The anger is palpable and unrest is frequent. The social contract is broken. Faith in democracy is eroding, especially among the youth, as more people lose hope in the political process. Corruption unites South Africans in anger, but it also creates a dangerous vacuum, one that populist leaders are eager to fill, promising radical change. In response, President Ramaphosa has launched anti-corruption drives and reforms, with some high-profile arrests and new oversight bodies. But progress is slow, and scepticism remains high. Despite the crisis, many South Africans are fighting back, demanding accountability, rebuilding trust and working to restore the promise of democracy. As of July 2025, South Africa stands at a crossroads. its future uncertain, its people searching for direction. The choices made in the coming years will shape the destiny of a nation. The hope of 1994 has given way to fear and doubt. Unemployment remains high, and many fear that inequality will deepen. Experts warn that without honest leadership, a war on corruption and real economic reform, the country risks sliding further into crisis. Some analysts predict a slow but steady recovery if reforms are implemented, pointing to the nation's entrepreneurial spirit and vibrant civil society. Others warn of a lost decade if political infighting and policy paralysis persist. Without change, deeper unrest and instability loom. Some fear a rise in populism and xenophobia, while others worry about the erosion of democratic institutions. Yet, resilience endures. Many still work to build bridges and hold leaders accountable. Experts highlight the potential for grassroots innovation and community-driven change to spark a new era of renewal. The struggle for South Africa's soul continues, fought in communities, at the ballot box and in the hearts of its people. Some experts predict a generational shift in politics, with young leaders demanding accountability and transparency. The world watches, hoping this complex nation can find its way back from the edge. Whether South Africa rises or falters will depend on the courage of its people, the wisdom of its leaders, and the choices made in the face of uncertainty. Education in South Africa stands as both a promise and a challenge, a battleground where the nation's future will be decided. For millions of young South Africans, the classroom is more than a place to learn. It is a lifeline to opportunity, dignity, and hope. Yet, the reality is stark. Many schools are under-resourced, with overcrowded classrooms, a shortage of qualified teachers, and inadequate infrastructure. Rural and township schools often struggle the most, leaving students at a disadvantage before they even begin. The challenges faced by the youth are profound. Unemployment among young people remains stubbornly high, and those without access to quality education face even greater barriers. For many, the dream of upward mobility feels out of reach, fueling frustration and disillusionment. But within these challenges there is also resilience. Across the country, students, teachers and communities are finding innovative ways to bridge the gaps through after-school programs, mentorship and digital learning initiatives. Education is more than just a pathway to jobs. It is the foundation of a healthy democracy. It empowers young people to question, to dream and to lead. As South Africa stands at a crossroads, the fight for quality education is more urgent than ever. The youth are not just the leaders of tomorrow, they are the architects of today's solutions. Whether South Africa rises to meet its challenges will depend, in large part, on the investments made in its youngest citizens. Their determination, creativity and courage could yet light the way to a brighter, more equal future. Access to healthcare and social services is a cornerstone of any thriving society. In South Africa, the healthcare system mirrors the country's broader inequalities, a mix of world-class private hospitals and under-resourced public clinics. For many, especially in rural areas and informal settlements, basic medical care remains out of reach. Long queues, staff shortages and limited supplies are daily realities for millions who rely on public facilities. Social services meant to provide a safety net for the most vulnerable face their own challenges. Grants for the elderly, children and those with disabilities offer crucial support, but the process can be slow, bureaucratic and sometimes inaccessible to those who need it most. For families already struggling with poverty, the lack of reliable health care and social assistance can turn everyday setbacks into crises. Yet there are glimmers of hope. Community health workers, mobile clinics and grassroots organisations are finding creative ways to bring care and support to those who would otherwise be left behind. Across the country, ordinary South Africans step up to care for neighbours, advocate for better services and push for reform. The fight for health and well-being is about more than medicine. It's about dignity, justice and the right to a fair chance at life. As South Africa looks to the future, the strength of its social fabric will be measured not just by economic growth, but by how well it cares for its people, especially the most vulnerable. In the struggle for a healthier, more just society, every act of compassion and innovation brings the nation one step closer to hope. South Africa stands at a critical economic crossroads. Despite being one of Africa's largest economies, the country faces slow growth and high unemployment, especially among young people. For many, the promise of a stable job remains elusive. Factories have closed, mines have downsized, and new industries struggle to absorb millions searching for work. Entrepreneurship has become both a necessity and a lifeline. Across townships and cities, South Africans are starting small businesses, hustling to make ends meet and creating opportunities where few exist. Street vendors, tech startups and community cooperatives all reflect the nation's resourcefulness and drive. But the path is not easy. Entrepreneurs face barriers like limited access to capital, red tape and unreliable infrastructure. Load shedding, rolling blackouts disrupt businesses daily, while crime and corruption add to the cost of doing business. For many, the informal sector is the only option, but it offers little security or protection. Meanwhile, the gap between rich and poor remains stark. While some sectors thrive, millions are left behind, fueling frustration and uncertainty about the future. The government's efforts to stimulate growth through investment, reform and support for small businesses are vital, but progress is slow and uneven. South Africa's economic journey is a story of resilience and challenge. The fight for growth, jobs and opportunity is ongoing. For the nation to thrive, it must harness its entrepreneurial spirit, address deep-seated inequalities and unlock the potential of its people. The road ahead is difficult, but with determination and innovation, a more inclusive and prosperous future is still within reach. As South Africa navigates its economic crossroads, another challenge looms ever larger, one that touches every life, field and city, the environment. The country's rich landscapes, from the wild savannas to the rolling vineyards and bustling coasts, are under threat from climate change, pollution and resource depletion. Droughts have become more frequent and severe, drying up rivers and leaving farmers desperate. In places like the Western Cape, water scarcity has forced entire cities to the brink, while rural communities struggle to survive. Rising temperatures and unpredictable rainfall patterns threaten food security, endanger wildlife, and put traditional ways of life at risk. In the cities, air pollution and waste are growing concerns. The legacy of mining and industry has left scars, contaminated land, polluted rivers and toxic air that harms people and ecosystems alike. As the demand for energy grows, South Africa's reliance on coal continues to drive emissions, making the nation one of Africa's largest polluters. But across the country, people are fighting back. From community clean-up projects to innovative water-saving technologies, South Africans are finding ways to adapt and protect their environment. Conservationists work to preserve biodiversity, while entrepreneurs develop green businesses and renewable energy solutions. Even among the challenges, seeds of hope are being planted. Government policies aim to balance growth with sustainability, but progress is slow, and enforcement remains a struggle. The road to a greener future requires not just innovation and investment, but a shift in mindset, a recognition that the health of the land is tied to the health of the nation. The environmental crisis is a test of resilience, ingenuity and unity. As South Africa faces the realities of climate change, the choices made today will shape the world inherited by future generations. The question remains, Can the nation rise to meet the challenge and build a sustainable tomorrow? As South Africa grapples with its environmental and economic crossroads, another powerful force shapes the nation's journey. Its culture, the evolving sense of national identity, and the ongoing process of reconciliation. From the vibrant rhythms of township jazz to the intricate beadwork of rural artisans, South Africa's cultural tapestry is woven from a multitude of traditions, languages and histories. 11 official languages echo across the land, each carrying stories of struggle, resilience and hope. In bustling cities and quiet villages alike, art, music and dance become both a celebration and a conversation, a way for communities to express pain, pride and possibility. Since the end of apartheid, efforts to forge a shared national identity have been both inspiring and complex. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, led by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, offered a path toward healing, encouraging openness, forgiveness and dialogue in the face of deep wounds. Statues, museums and memorials now stand as reminders of the past, while new generations grapple with what it means to be South African in a changing world. But reconciliation is not a destination, it is a journey. Lingering divisions, economic disparities and sometimes simmering tensions remind everyone that the work is far from finished. Yet in schools, sports stadiums and community halls, people come together to learn, to remember and to imagine a future where unity does not erase difference, but celebrates it. Culture is the heartbeat of South Africa. It is the laughter at a family braai, the pride in a Springbok victory, the solemn reflection on June 16th. It is a constant reminder that despite challenges, the dream of the Rainbow Nation endures, not just in policy or politics, but in the everyday acts of understanding, respect and hope. In the face of adversity, it is these threads of unity, woven through culture, identity and reconciliation, that offer a vision of what South Africa can become. A nation strengthened by its diversity and united by a shared determination to build a better tomorrow.